Welcome to Mosaic Mind, where leadership is not a rigid portrait, but a vibrant mosaic shimmering with the unique experience of each leader. Forget the one-size-fits-all approach. Here, we celebrate the fascinating interplay between culture and leadership, especially the remarkable women shaping the future of Vietnam. I'm May Holland, your guide on this exciting journey. I'm a mix of French, Aussie, and Vietnamese myself, so I understand the power of cultural fusion. So buckle up as we chat with inspiring women leaders and explore how their background have shaped their leadership style. So our guest today is the incredible Patricia Marques. She has a very rich background in international growth and cultural adaptation. Patricia has been living and working in Vietnam for the past 14 years. Patricia is known for her visionary work in ensuring her sustainable growth of the brand she represents while respecting local cultures. She launched hundreds of international stores in diverse markets like the USA, Mexico, Dubai, Riyadh, Zurich, Madrid, Lima, Puerto Rico, Hong Kong, and Ho Chi Minh City. Welcome, Patricia. How are you?
Morning. Good morning, my very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Okay. So, we had a bit of a chat together before, and I have a few questions, for our conversation today. And I would like just to have a few questions about, one aspect of your cultural fusion and leadership. So I recall that you mentioned that you had interesting cultural start in life. You speak Spanish as you were born in Peru, but your kindy was very special. Can you tell us more about your kindy time, please?
Yes, sure. So I was born in Lima, Peru, and one of many siblings, a very large, typical Latin American family of my days when I was little, and a very interesting decision from my parents to send us to a Chinese American school. So from very, very early in my life, I was exposed to different cultures, different languages, and of course, all the differences that you can imagine between a Chinese 5-year-old kid and a 5-year-old Peruvian kid. One of the other unique, probably, probably not the commonality in those days. I was in an all mixed uh, gender school. So we didn't, we grew up with boys and girls, which I think made my early years growing up very, very interesting.
Yes. I mean, I think you're probably my first person that I have met who has a kindy and learning uh, Cantonese, right? So not
Yes.
Mandarin, right? Cantonese, right? So I think it's absolutely fascinating to be in Kindi and, and learn, something, not in the traditional, not in the way that we expect to hear from a Kindi memory. So you were exposed very, very early, to, that kind of cultural, mix, that you just mentioned. So you moved from Peru to Argentina and then Mexico and then the US. And I recall that you mentioned that you encountered your first racial discrimination. So that was not in the other countries, but this is when you arrived to USA, and you were really surprised. Can you share a little bit about that moment with you? One, how it was um, for you, not to be surprised that you felt different there. How was it?
Uh, I think throughout my upbringing, I always hear about different races and how they can be unique. As a matter of fact, you myself ask, why do they do this versus us that we do it in different ways? So there is always that curiosity within us, right? To find those nuances between one culture and the other. And I think that's super normal. What I found very, very different is the portrait of different cultures under a big umbrella of this group doesn't do well, this group is usually in trouble. Careful with this group because it's aggressive. And I had not ever seen or been exposed to that kind of conversation. So I was really surprised about that language attached to race. I think we are all good. We can all become during certain circumstances. I don't know that it has anything to do with the color of our skin or the language we speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think your perspective that you mentioned, because you have such an upbringing, a very cultural upbringing, and then seeing that the language that you mentioned about, it's very different depending where you go and depending of the people that you're meeting. So you have been living in Vietnam for 14 years, and I believe that's the longest time that you have been overseas. So I don't know how we understand overseas, but can you tell us more about, those 14 years here? Because you've been traveling a lot, you've been living in so many countries. But I recall that you said that it's when you arrived to Vietnam, you were quite familiar with the Vietnamese culture. You were not shocked. Can you tell us a little bit more about, the Latin American culture and the Vietnamese one? So very, very curious about this.
You're correct. First, it's true. I have moved and lived in many places, many beautiful countries, cities in the world throughout my career. But I have never stayed in any overseas place for this long. It is a combination of things that happened to me. First, it is absolutely true. You have very good memory. We talk about this. When I arrived in Vietnam, arrived on a Thursday late, very late night. On the Friday, I went to work, and it was a very, very impactful day, joyful day, with a very interesting group of people, foreigners and locals. And my following day, Saturday, I actually moved to where it was supposed to become temporary housing, and I dived into the Vietnamese culture, right? So I was received by a couple of co-workers that helped me settle in this temporary house, and we just went ahead in motorbikes to do my first shopping and to the these ladies were wonderful and taught me how to maneuver a motorbike in Vietnam. I remember that weekend like it was yesterday. It was really a happy, happy, happy beginning of my time in Vietnam. The first thing that struck me was how similar society was to Latin American society. And let me be specific. One of the things that I noticed was that even though in Vietnam they utilized motorbikes as their main form of transportation in those days, 14 years ago, believe me, there was nothing like today, right? 14 years ago, I can tell you, it was 90% motorbikes. So you could see parents with their kids, mothers with their children, coming back from the supermarket full of shopping bags. I remember seeing this guy in a motorbike with somebody else holding a small refrigerator. So they were moving a refrigerator from one place to the other. And what struck me as really familiar was a community of family, children and the parents on the motorbikes, and just riding on the weekend. It was very familiar to me. Then that afternoon, the ladies took me walking into the city, and I continue seeing those similarities and appreciating what I was so familiar with. So tables were full of adults and children running around and being loud, just like in our countries. So very, very, I felt very comfortable from the very beginning. I also loved the fact that everybody was mixed with everybody, so you could see a guy wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and next to him, lady beautifully dressed, walking probably to the same event, and everybody was feeling super comfortable. And I truly loved that from Vietnam. So I would say that my first days were so welcoming and so at ease in my very drastic move. I had just moved from, Middle East and the US to Vietnam. That was pretty drastic move, but I felt at home. I can say from the very beginning.
Yes. I mean, thank you for sharing the stories, the family around, the family all together, the children, the food, the chaos really. And my mic just fell down, but it's okay. And I think that, when you mentioned this, is also because, you have that cultural background, where you grew up as well, which really say a lot about, how life is really full of life. So yeah, it's really quite a different, background, from, when you move to Vietnam and see how the change is. So basically, for the last 14 years, you have been managing Starbucks Cafe Vietnam, Coffee Vietnam, and with the business development of Maxims. Can you tell us a little bit more about your global experience, how it shaped your views on cultural adaptation and your sense of leadership, please?
So from very early, for some reasons, were never planned. It just evolved and happened like that, like most things in life. I was drawn by searching for interesting outside my comfort zone experiences. So I moved to Argentina very young and had a wonderful few years there where I learned not only a profession, but also um, the bounties of that mixed culture. Remember being surprised about the differences in neighbors almost, but how different people were. One of the differences was or is part of who they are, right? They are very they're very strong, strong culture, and therefore the way they speak is also very assertive. Something very different from my country, where probably we're more shy and we don't necessarily express ourselves with that assertiveness. So I admire that while, of course, being very different from where I came. So I learned how to incorporate a little bit of that into my own um, way of speaking. The people around me, great friends, great friends, we were in all because I would speak in a low volume compared to them. They're
Yes.
louder. So some of them adapted to my volume. And that was very funny because we made comments about, people, when somebody speaks loud, the other person thinks they have to speak a little bit louder versus my style, which is exactly the opposite. If somebody speaks loud, you usually speak lower to lower their voices. So that was a very interesting exchange of culture and traditions, I guess. It's a lovely time. in that wonderful and generous country. From there, I moved to Mexico, where I think everybody knows Mexico in many countries in Latin America are very, very similar, right? Mexico's wonderful. I have to say, one of my favorite countries in the world, maybe because it has the things that I love, art and colors. It's a very colorful country. People are wonderful, generous. I love their food, the regionality of it. So I had great memories of my time in Mexico, where again, you learn so many things and you adapt, right? To the place where you are. You don't change, but you adapt. There are many words that come from my country that probably are not necessarily used or welcome in Mexico. So you kind of eliminate them from your vocabulary and learn others that are very interesting and very unique to that country. And from there on, it was really easy for me. Maybe I developed that skill where I didn't feel um, intimidated, but more curious and more inclined to be a good observer of my surroundings. I work in places like Riyadh and Jeddah, which are completely different from my upbringing and the countries that I have lived there before. And yet, I can tell you, I had a very successful time. I made friends, which I'm still in contact with, wonderful people. So, just I would say my treasure hunting became just chest became bigger and bigger with all these experiences.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting that you made the point about when you live overseas and when you work overseas, you make the point between changing and adapting. And I was just wondering if you want to delve deeper into that, because sometimes when people go overseas and they say, we have to change our personality or change our culture, but what's your take on that one? You mentioned about adapting.
Oh, I don't think there is change in personality. Definitely believe in this old say of do what you see where you are, right? And but that doesn't mean that you have to change your the way you are, who you are. And I did adapt, which is different. A little bit of what we did at Starbucks in Vietnam, right? You adapt certain things. For example, the when we opened here, welcoming was very unique to Vietnam. They told me, "Oh, we never do those welcome to Starbucks. We don't do those welcomes in Vietnam." So I tried to introduce it as something that they could be proud of and unique, and maybe customers would love to come because it was so unique. And they adopted and they adopt that welcome to Starbucks. So that was a very interesting step on adaptation. On the other hand, I learned that Vietnamese don't necessarily consume the same amount of sugar than North America, for example, right? So we adapted our drinks to the level because we knew that they were not happy with what they were trying. So definitely we listen to their likes and whatever we can please them with. This is a business, so we should. And we found sort of a medium where we could meet and make sure that we grew the brand healthy while satisfying our customers.
Yeah. So you've been listening and you've been adapting. So thank you for sharing. And yeah, and you mentioned that, sugar is one of the things that you have adapted to, to the local taste, obviously. And I was wondering if you can also talk about, the challenges that you might have faced, during that sustainable growth of the brands that you have been managing, while obviously respecting local cultures as well. So can you share any challenges that you want to share with us today?
When we move from our country or our comfortable zones, we will face challenges of many kinds, right? From adapting to what you consider to be the normal size of an apartment in your country or where you're coming from, to the new size of what is an apartment in this part of the world. So that can become a challenge where you're, thinking, oh my God, I cannot fit my things here. So very early on, I learned to travel light, I would say. And not only to travel light, but to um, have a very zen environment, one that will allow me to then pack and move to my next destination without being attached to all these things that at the end of the day don't bring any value to our lives, right? Or more most of noise and space. So I really started valuing what really things meant to me. Um, yeah, I have conquered that. I came to Vietnam with two big pieces of luggage, and I plan to leave Vietnam with two large pieces of luggage. So challenges will present in many ways. If you are in a good place, and that means if you feel comfortable with where you are, if you're happy, if your work environment is positive, things are going well for you, I can assure you all of those challenges can be conquered. Once you settle, you will see that again, most of those are really insignificant. The significant ones will will evolve, right? You will learn how to manage those. So business wise, for example, I remember when I first came to this country, it was unheard to find a commercial lease for longer than 12 months. The common agreement was for 12 months. Of course, in our business model, since we invest so much in our shops, in our stores, that we needed to guarantee a permanency in that lease. So that was a very interesting but big business challenge. So it took quite a bit of convincing to to get our first lease being signed for a much longer period of time. And from that initial lease, we were able to have meetings, very long meetings and conversations with our landlords and explain to them the value of having one tenant for a long period of time. That was our biggest business challenge when we first moved to Vietnam.
That's interesting because I heard from other people as well that, securing a long-term lease is actually a very big challenge. So yeah, so maybe there's something, in the culture of, of managing certainty and, yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing this. So your career, I mean, obviously you worked in so many countries and across many cultures as well. So I was wondering if you're really reflecting on this. So, we hear about, how you deal with challenges. I was really curious and interesting about how those experiences shape your views in terms of your intercultural identity and really uh, how it influenced that, your business development mindset and your leadership style. It's quite a big question, but I'm really interested in having your take on that one. And what countries have shaped you the most? The learnings, the mistakes. So it's really about, how do you feel about your intercultural identity?
Yep. It is a very big question. I think perhaps one of the first or the easy way to start this answer is to say where I found that I would probably not find a match with my personality. So I think that was easy. Very quickly, I could I could see where places could be long term for me versus just the short term. So from that point, you kind of narrow the possibilities. But in the places where I really found joy and the 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 desire of a little bit more permanency, and where I learned a lot, which was in, I have to say, the majority of the places that I've been. I think you absorb what surrounds you and it probably filter out the things that make you uncomfortable without denying the interest you have in that place. So you can adapt yourself, values, your personality to a place where you find that it's not controversial, where you can continue exploring without being forced to change. I think that's the freedom of adapting, which is something, for example, that I found here. And throughout the years, I have learned how to speak to Vietnamese. What are their biggest differences with other cultures? How to manage those differences? How do I present myself to not only Vietnamese, but I've been in Asia for some time now. For example, the losing face culture of Asia, right, is very unique to Asia. Very unique to Asia. In many Western countries, they actually challenge you for strong feedback. Come on, say it to me. Here is different. It works in different ways. Not that they don't want feedback, but they want it in a different way. So, I, I guess it has been like starting to build a, a, a Lego piece, right? One block at a time. And I can tell you, when I return to those places where I have been the most happy, I return and I feel, oh, I know why now. You know, I love sunny, hot, love the ocean. I like people smiling. So I feel very, very happy and comfortable, even if language is a barrier. But I feel that it's already part of me.
What makes you smile, Patricia?
All around me, generosity of people, a beautiful morning.
Yeah. Well, that makes me smile too. Okay. So let's move now to more insight and advice. So, what advice would you like to give to younger people or to anyone, navigating cultural richness or unfamiliar territory? What would you tell them?
When people ask me, uh, their question is, "Hey, I heard you live in this country. Any particular recommendations?" I always say the same. Is this your first time outside your country? The reason I ask that question is because there are countries that are much easier to be your stepping stone into multicultural experiences, right? Let me give you an example. You're from a Spanish speaking country to, and for the first time, to Asia or Africa might not be the easiest of the moves. Right? Considering that many Spanish speaking countries have adopted English as their second language, there's so many countries in Africa and in Asia that also have English speaking, but they're very far from your culture. They might be very distant from what you're used to. Daily, from food, from environment, from so many things. There are other countries that might be easier to make the first move. But my recommendation in general is to be open minded. Open minded, think things for what they're worth. Don't be judgmental of. Let me make a parenthesis and share with you a very funny story about Vietnam. Love how Westerners judge the way Vietnamese drive, right? So it's probably the biggest subject in many platforms, how Vietnamese drive. Really, Vietnamese have a way of driving that is different than ours, definitely. Kind of chaotic, yes, but it's the most gentle chaos I have been in. Because Vietnamese don't go for the 100 miles an hour and honking and opening, trying to smash everybody while they're trying to get from point A to point B. It drives like 40 miles per hour, which is amazing. So they're not aggressive. Therefore, all of us can navigate around them. I don't believe Vietnamese will ever drive like Westerners. And that's perfectly fine. We have to adapt. I learned one thing in Vietnam is I should never be the first one to go when the line changes because somebody is going to try to run before the red light hits them. So, you learn some tricks and just adapt to those. So my recommendation is be open-minded, serve. Don't be judgmental. Then your first year and a half is going to be sad. Is going to be one of those, oh my God, why did I leave home? Why did I come here? And you're going to regret it instead of enjoying being part of a new community, a new society, something super interesting. So that's my recommendation.
I love how you say the gentle chaos. I have never heard those two words going together, but I absolutely going to quote this from you because you are absolutely so right about describing something which can be seen from outside of Vietnam as absolutely undescribable, but it works. And this is amazing. I mean, the gentle word that you have chosen to to share today, and this is why the name of the podcast is called Mosaic Mind. It's really about how to take those pieces of, advice and recommendation that you mentioned, non-judgmental, adapting, being open-minded, and really remind people, how they can really be intentional about how, if they want to embrace that global culture. So definitely not that judgmental mind that you mentioned. So thank you. And I was just wondering, breakfast. What are you? Are you a pho, or are you bread, or what kind of person are you for breakfast, Patricia?
I'm a simple cup of black coffee.
Oh, okay,
That's my breakfast.
right. Okay, okay. So traditional black coffee
Yes,
and nothing else.
nothing else.
Nothing else. Okay. So we talk a little bit, a lot about, your influence, your leadership influence, and all those cultural influence on you, and a few words more about you. So can you tell us about, your favorite books or musics or hobbies, whatever that you're enjoying, especially now in Vietnam, so then you can relax after your work or maybe during your
I
work.
actually am very active. I love sports and physical activities of spinning, like yoga. I enjoy Pilates. I like walks. It's not easy to walk in Ho Chi Minh, but I love walking. I also have a huge passion for reading. I enjoy my sneaking times into Fahasa and just browsing on new books. It's a very interesting, and they have beautiful library and bookstores here where they have enormous amount of English books. So I really enjoy reading. What do I enjoy reading? Well, favorite um, I would say I don't have a favorite. Maybe I used to read more Latin American writers, but I'm reading a lot of Japanese. I'm reading many Europeans now, and I also like those empowering books and books that can help me develop myself. Sometimes we think we don't have enough time for ourselves, but you can always sneak half an hour here and there and find time to read a good book about how to be better, how to be more involved in society. I'm reading a lot of recycle, upcycle, circularity, which really I feel very passionate about, and I'm learning quite a bit. So, yeah, I would say never a dull moment.
I can feel it. I absolutely feel, your active mind, and I'm sure that, this is contagious with the team members that you're working with. I can really feel, those positive, mindset and vibe that you're giving to other people as well. Cause I can feel it, even on this podcast. Very open-minded, obviously. And even, you mentioned about all those cultural books, from many countries that you mentioned, you made me realize that I don't read enough, of, some cultures that yes, so that's my takeaway for today. So thank you. And, yes, that is a very good point. So finally, about the future plans, can you tell us a few words, what's next for you in your next journey? I mean, any future projects or goals that you're most excited about that you want to share with us today?
The future is always exciting. That's the way I see it, right? The beauty is you don't know where the future is going to take you. I feel I'm home, so I'm not necessarily searching for a next place to go. Basically, traveling is a passion of mine, and I will continue, and maybe I have now more time to do so. So definitely in my plans. But I truly feel at home. I love this country, and there's so many possibilities. Nam is a if if it's something, it's a phrase that I can use, I can probably use that one. This is a country of possibilities where you can find the most incredible opportunities around the corner. I just ran into this lady and I started volunteering walking dogs, for example. I love dogs. And there is this community of people that, hey, let's volunteer on this rescue center to walk dogs. Happens to be a wonderful part of my week now. And you make friends and you learn how to, even though you love the dogs, you know, they will stay there or they will be adopted by somebody else. So it's those happy moments make my future, make me think of a very joyful future. So I guess the unexpected is what I expect.
That is such a beautiful way to close this podcast today. I can feel and I can hear and I can feel, you know, the wisdom into your sharing today. This is absolutely wonderful. And you also inspired me, you know, to go back and read different kind of books. You know, I'm reading the same type of books all the time, but really thank you. And actually, you know, traveling through books is, as you mentioned, you know, really help, you know, to open your mind and cultivate, you know, that kind of mindset that, you know, we want to share this today, especially on Mosaic Mind. So, Patricia, we can follow you on LinkedIn, I believe. So we will put your link in the descriptions below. Patricia, it has been a delight to have you today. So from Australia to Vietnam, I send you my love and really thank you for your time, your wisdom, your inspiration for today. And we see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.